Hi, my name's Steve Usher, and welcome to the Experienced Designers Podcast. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Experienced Designers Podcast. Today, I had the absolute pleasure of meeting Morten Raahauge from Denmark. Morten has worked across a variety of industries, both as an internal and external consultant. He's a certified experience economy expert and is currently working as a chief experience officer for a startup based in Denmark. So we delved into the topic of employee experience and discussed, the need for some form of kind of method and design in HR. And Morten shared some really great practical examples and learnings from other industries such as transportation. But also he shared some really fantastic models, which I think for any aspiring HR individual out there, or for anyone to really engage in some change and put experience very much at the heart of your decisions or your business or team, then there was some really great information and knowledge shared that I think anybody could use and apply to literally tomorrow. So enjoy the show, and thank you very much for listening. So hi, Morten. Welcome to the Experienced Designers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining me for this episode.
My pleasure.
Good stuff. So we've got a few things we wanted to cover off today as part of this kind of interview or discussion.
Sure.
And quite a lot of it's going to be centered around kind of employee experience and the evolution of that and where we think this could be heading and how HR departments could be developing the employee experience and
Sure.
playing a big part in that and a big influence.
Yes.
And I think one of the things for me, just to kind of, to lay some context, I just think generally right now, employee experience is a really hot topic. I think we've gone through a period, probably in the last, certainly in the last 10 years, there's always been that discussion around employee engagement. And certainly in the UK, there was a lot of discussion around, or a lot of research undertaken. There was a chap, I think his name is David McCleod, and he did some work under the previous UK government, Labour government, and latterly with the Conservative government, which is around employee engagement and looking at that from a kind of top-down perspective.
Yeah.
Whereas kind of this kind of evolution around employee experiences tends to be that kind of bottom-up and looking at shaping and creating experiences for employees.
Yeah.
So I know that I guess kind of falls in line with some of the experience economy stuff, which I'm sure we'll cover off. But what's your view around this? Where do you think we are around this kind of employee experience topic right now? What's kind of driving this, and why are we here from this perspective?
Well, I think there's a lot of discussion on the topic, and what I've been noticing is that people seem to have a little bit of not necessarily difficulties, but you can sort of attack this from an array of different angles. And for me, it's pretty simple because I'm a fully experienced, not fully experienced, but certified experience economy expert. So for me, sort of the whole methodology is there. So it's really just applying experience design to this new area. I mean, just as you would any other business or any other business area, really, it's just another business area that needs to go through the same sort of, or can be put through the same design method as you could any other thing, really. Yes. So the methodology is there, and there's a lot of models, and I think if this is something you want to work with, then all the things that are all the models, all the ways of viewing things that's in the experience economy can be applied pretty in a pretty straightforward way and be easy actually. So for me it's easy, but there seems to be this big discussion also. So the different parts. Okay, so what's the employee experience here? What's the employee experience here? And one other thing. When you talk about experience, it usually centers on things that are sort of experiences by themselves, sort of. So in the experience economy, you often speak about concerts or festivals or tourism and stuff like that. But this is really a way of looking at things that can be applied to to anything, and especially in business, and still make a lot of sense. So it doesn't have to be sort of above the experience of just going to work in the morning.
Yes.
But I mean, you can even work on that if you want to, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So what? So just taking, I guess, from the other functional, other business areas that have gone through this change, because I mean, HR and I think learning L&D, learning development, tend to be the ones that kind of lag behind. I think is my view around within organisations, which is crazy because it's the most people-focused areas. But what would you say are some of the? I mean, just if for the listeners out there that are sitting in a human resource department or some kind of talent department, what kind of symptoms do you think that they will be seeing within the organisation that would, I guess, kind of lean well to kind of say, look, we need to look at adopting or engaging some kind of experience design?
Well, when I work with experience design in other areas, the first thing you really need to, first you have to decide that this is what you want to do. I mean, you can't just, I'll do some of it, or I mean, so the more, so if it gets to be a strategic approach, I think that's good. And I think the way HR could look at it is that if you want to step up really the HR, then this is definitely a way to go. Then there's something about the name. I mean, HR, human resources. And if you look at resources as a word in itself, it's like people are being dug up from the ground or picked off trees, and they're really not, because they're actually humans. so there's in the commodities industry, which would be, I mean, all other kinds of resources, metals, crops, whatever. In this economy, the business imperative is to supply availability. So what HR is doing right now is they have this commodities approach to people. So what they do is they provide that they supply availability. So they have a steady influx of people to the organization, right? The other thing they're doing is linked to the product economy, where they control the cost. So that would be sort of negotiating your salary or bonus programs and stuff like that. So really right now what they do in HR is that they're stuck sort of in a sort of a narrative that is linked to the commodities and to the goods economy.
Yeah.
And in the progression of economic value, the next economy is a service economy. Then it's an experience economy, and then it's a transformation economy. So what does HR, and you probably have to change the name, but what does HR look like if it's a service? What does it look like if it's an experience? And that would be employee experience. And what does it look like if it's the transformation economy?
Yes.
So a lot of things are linked to the way they speak about things. So we discussed this briefly. So you had this there's this word talent acquisition. So the notion that you acquire talent just as you would acquire, buildings, machinery, physical assets is just, I can't get my head around that. Why would you talk about people in a way that sort of puts them on the same level as a piece of machinery? I don't get that. It's very much this industrial mindset about what work is.
Yes.
And what people is. So I think in many ways, I mean, this is a bit harsh, but I think in many ways, HR is dehumanizing humans because they speak about them in ways that makes them not human. There's this big Danish company the other day, Novo. You probably heard of them. They had to lay up 1,300 people. Right. And the way they speak about it is not that they destroy, I mean, at least momentarily, the lives of 1,300 people. No, they're just cutting back. And I mean, what's that about? So there's this lack of empathy, sort of. There's this lack of understanding that people wake up in the morning with real aspirations about themselves and what they want to do in a work relation or in their private life. So how can you sort of tap into that? I think that should be a thing that HR might think about in a different way. Yeah.
And there was a couple of, not so much models, but books that we talked about as well, which is the exponential growth and the experience economy. So what are you okay to just give us a bit of an overview for those that aren't aware of those books or haven't come across those books as yet?
Sure. The experience economy was written by Joe Pine, and I think it's sort of 20 years old, so it's not a new thing. Sort of, he's still traveling the roads with this book, and everybody think, oh, there's this new thing around. So, but it's been around for 20 years. And I've worked with Joe on a lot of occasions. Then they have this book, the Exponential Organization, and the Exponential Organization is really about building a new sort of organization. And the main feature about this kind of organization, they have to be scalable. So they sort of, I mean, for if you're a startup, this makes sense, but if you're a large company, it might make less sense. But the thing about startups is that they have to be scalable, because as you go along, you need more people, or you need a little more people for a time of period, or something like that. And they have these two things. So they have these. If you can tap into a community or a crowd that sort of links to what you do or things you work with, and then you have something called staff on demand. So it's really much the notion that if the future of work is people working, they might have a sort of a regular job, or maybe they work on different projects all the time. So they're more free agents, sort of.
Yeah.
And the way I think about it, if everybody is working as a free agent, or have a part of their life where they work as a free agent, how do you ensure then, if they can choose from, I mean, you have the means to be working from anywhere and with anywhere in the world. So if you can choose from anything, how do you then make sure that people come back to your organization, your projects all the time? I think you might look at employee experiences as a way of not ensuring it, but making it more probable that they would actually choose your organization.
Yeah. So, because I think there's definitely we've seen certainly in the US and UK, Sweden less so actually. But there's definitely obviously the gig economy from that perspective. So the workforce is obviously becoming far more liquid, or far more diverse from that perspective. But then also as well, that's kind of from an external point of view, but internally within organizations, we're starting to see companies like ING Direct, for example, who are moving into a much more fluid workforce and implementing agile, not just from a systems point of view, but across actually organizational. So it's quite interesting. It kind of supports that notion around that we've got this kind of a workforce that is less static, as to a certain degree. It's a lot more kind of liquid and moves around. And
absolutely.
free.
And it's funny that you mentioned ING, because ING has been one of the first movers in terms of applying actually experience economy principles to some of to their banking business.
Yes.
So so they're quite upfront.
Yes, they are.
They're thinking,
Yeah, and also I saw something on, I think it was on YouTube actually, and they showed how quick they move from an idea into just putting it out there with customers, and then just refining it in real time with customers. So it was really just very, very lean, very, very agile in terms of it.
Yes.
So but it's definitely happening. Whether it's happening quick enough is another question.
It's always a question.
But it's exciting I think it's exciting. I think workplace has to change, and I think the way we're working, the work is evolving at such an interesting lots of directions actually.
I mean, if you have your LinkedIn feed or something, you sometimes get the notion, oh, I have to do all these things. So I think one way to look at employee experience is that it's an option. It's something you can work with in a limited setting if you just want to try something out. The models are out there, and you might want to view. The way I view methods and models is very much the same as sunglasses. So you put on a specific pair of sunglasses, then this is enhanced. This gets a little harder to see, and then you can put on another set of sunglasses. So it's really much about trying.
Yes.
And then having short feedback loops, and short feedback loops is the same as being agile. So it's, I mean, just go out and test something.
Yes.
Don't be too afraid. And then try to pick up as you go, really.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. So I think principally that sounds brilliant, and I think lots of organisations are obviously doing that, but there's some that really struggle to even get started with something like that, and that's kind of obviously the way the environment is, or the way the culture is, or so because obviously moving forward and failing sometimes. isn't always perceived particularly well in a traditional organisational sense. But obviously, it's important. It's important in part in terms of learning and moving forward, and I understand that. But then sometimes
I think this is big discussion now, at least in Denmark, because you have you need to learn to fail and stuff like that, because you have this zero fail cultures in a lot of organizations. But it's really not about failing. I mean, it's not learning by crashing necessarily. It just means that you have to accept knowledge or insight as an outcome. Okay, so did it work? No, maybe not the way it was intended, but we learned a lot of things, and this learning we can actually use. So I think it's more about changing. The output.
Yes.
And insight can never be a bad sort of output. I mean, if you ask people, when did you learn the most? It was usually when they made mistakes, right? So everybody agrees on this on a human level. So why should it be any different just because we're in a company setting? It's got to be the same thing, right?
Absolutely.
And then there's this other thing about, I mean, whenever you try to implement or apply experience economy design principles, it's not expensive. It doesn't cost you anything. It's only sort of putting on a different pair of sunglasses and then sort of restructuring the way you think about things. That's the only thing you have to do. So it doesn't have to be. It might be difficult in terms of you just need this adjustment of your head, sort of, but it's not expensive. So it's not like, oh, people always say that if they're uncertain about what it is that you want to do. Oh, that sounds expensive, but it's really not. It doesn't cost you anything. It's just a way of restructuring the way you think about things.
Yes. So how? Okay. So in terms of, because we talked previously about an approach just to help organisations or people get started, which is around communities of practice.
Yeah, communities of practice. If you have this
which I thought was a really wonderful way, of a really low touch way of just creating a bit of a movement in terms of this stuff. So yeah,
the communities of practice. Well, as a format, it's very old. It's probably as old as human beings. But but the thing is that it's a more collaborative format. So if you have sort of a large scale organization, and you might have people spread out over, let's say, most of Europe, and there's a guy in Germany who does the same thing as you, and there's this woman in Sweden who does the same thing, and maybe somewhere else, but you never sort of speak to each other. So what organization can do is they can set up these, or people can form them themselves if they have sort of the willingness to do it. They can set up communities among themselves where they meet, and if you have sort of practitioners in the same practice area, and you just put them into a room and you just leave them there. They're gonna spend a few meetings just talking about, do you experience the same thing as I do? Do you have the same obstacles? Do you have all the same problems as me? And people tend to agree. Then that can be normalizing in sort of a way. So it's not me who's off my rocker. And then after a few meetings, they're gonna be looking to what it is that they do. And what usually comes from that is a lot of inputs to how you can change processes, how you can change all kinds of workflows, and actually pick up a lot of some efficiency from that. So you give people a sort of an internal network. It can help if you have a very siloed organization. It can actually it doesn't break down the silo. It just creates this thing that goes across.
Yes.
And the more communities of practice you have inside the organization, the more it's going to be, a thing that, of course, I should speak to people over here. Of course, I should speak to people outside my own silo, people who do maybe something else, because at some point when you work with processes, you have these, what do you call them? You have these, in Denmark it's a snitflade, but you have this, somebody takes over a process at a certain point, then it moves to somewhere else. So you have to speak to these people who okay, now they're taking over the process. So so you get this follow through thing.
Yes.
So it's very much about setting up a format who can break down silos and actually bring people together. And also this format is very it's very useful if you have people who are in sort of an onboarding situation. So it's a very fast way to keep people, get them on board, give them the internal network that they have, get them into projects that are ongoing, to just give them, in a really fast way, give them a set of people that they work with very closely.
And also, also I've seen it applied to when you're looking at perhaps an experience, and bringing together all of those that are kind of who share that experience and bringing in different perspectives. So perhaps from a hiring perspective, it might be the recruiter and hiring manager, for an example, are looking at those different perspectives and looking at those different areas and where they could improve, or what kind of frustrations they might be sharing, or common ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, onboarding just in terms of the resource that normally goes into onboarding somebody and the different departments that get involved in that. So I can see that really adding value.
And actually, you can also add learning, if you wish, to a community of practice. So we did this one idea. This is very, very specialized work. It might not make sense to people listening to this, but but you have people procuring Marcom resources. So resources, external resources for anything that has to do with marketing or communications. It's quite difficult, because if you have a global company, so you have something that's global, you have something that's local. So how do you manage that, and how do you then how do you resource these people who can help you, right? And it's very specialized. And so we figured out that in a company you might have 4 people or maybe more, 8 people somewhere, doing Marcom procurement. And if you have a sort of a skill set that's like 100%, some people might know 20%, somebody might know 40%, some guys may know everything there is to know about this subject. But the funny thing is, most people don't know all there is to know about one area. But if you then group these kind of this group of people, then once you have the internal network, you might know that there's this guy in Germany who knows, he does the same thing as you. But after you spoke to him, it's a lot easier to pick up the phone and say, I know you know about this, and I need help on this. So that's going to be the internal network, right? But then if you then put specialized knowledge into these groups of people by specialists in the area, everybody is going to learn a lot more, and they're going to be very comfortable with knowing, Eve knows this, Morten knows this, and So if you have a problem, it's a lot easier to just pick up the phone and call somebody and move on.
Yeah.
And so when everybody reached a certain level of knowledge, then you can take these specialists out, and you can just have people working among themselves, but then at a high level. So it's a very fast way also to do sort of learning formats inside the organization. That's the other thing that you might want to think about as if you work in HR. There's a lot of people who supply sort of knowledge or education to organization, but they're sort of trapped inside individual. Nobody sells the learning organization.
No.
Nobody sells that. And that would be a transformation economy sort of way of looking at the same thing.
Yes.
So instead of just selling people, courses and certifications and stuff like that, how do you make the learning organization? How do you acquire knowledge? How do you share knowledge? How do you just store it?
Yes.
That's a completely different way of looking at the same thing. So that was I was saying just before. Yeah. It's very much how you think about things. Yeah. Sort of the same things, right?
Yes. Yeah, because ultimately, if you're a business of 500 people or 200 or 1,000 plus, there's a lot of knowledge in there washing around that you could leverage and tap into.
Absolutely. And you have these traditional siloed organizations. They always struggle with this. How do you share knowledge, right? And they usually don't have a format for it. This communities of practice can be one way to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'd be interested to see how ING might be doing it. That could be interesting. So there was something you mentioned earlier, which is around methods and design. And perhaps I just want to tack something onto that. So maybe it's just something around methods and design in HR or for HR. Is there anything that stands out? Because obviously there's as a designer, you've got lots of tools that you can engage in, and there's lots of things that you pick up a lot over the years of experience. So are there any of those kind of methods or tools or anything that you've come across that you think actually this could work really well, just as from a HR context or perspective?
Yeah, one of the things we talked about was that people sometimes get a little, I'm not a designer, but but you sort of have to get beyond that, because you can design just as everybody else can design. I mean, it takes practice, but everybody can be a designer. And there's this one model that we just talked about that's going to work pretty well as a starting point for pretty much anything, and it has to do with one of the key features about an experience is that it's revealed over time.
Yeah. And
because it's revealed over time, you can apply sort of a dramatic structure. So if you're watching a movie, if you're watching a screenplay, if you're reading a book, there's a sort of an underlying model in how the plot is being presented, and that would be sort of the stage model for a dramatic structure. Yeah. So when you work with experience design, you have this 5-point model for a dramatic structure, and the first one, it's called the 5E model. So the first area is enticing. So what happens before people enter the experience? Then you have entering. So what happens the second people walk through the door, or whatever it is that they walk through? Then you have engaging, which is probably sort of during part. Then you have exiting. So what happens the second people move out? And then you have the extending. So what happens, after?
Yeah.
So this the good thing about this. So if you have sort of an employee lifespan, whether it's 2 months or 20 years, you can apply the same model. So it can be applied on every level of granularity.
Yes.
It can also be used to design a workshop.
Yep.
It can be used to pretty much design anything, and it just takes you through these different stages. And the thing is, people don't usually think that something important happens when you enter and when you exit, but actually, if you think about it, something really important happened. And also for HR, you can say, okay, I can do this as a employee lifespan, but I can also use it when people submit applications, for example.
Yeah.
So the enticing part would be, okay, so how do I make people interested in sending an application in the first place? So that has to do with sort of, that would be a marketing issue for the most part. But you can also apply experience design here if you want to. Then what happens the second people actually submit their application? When, what happens then? What happens as long as you review the application? That would be the engaging part. And then if you have a job and you have 100 people applying, there's going to be one person who actually gets the job, right? So 99 people have to exit.
Yeah.
So how do you ensure that the exit part also is working?
Yeah.
And can you throw? People invest resources in writing applications. So can you sort of throw resources their way? It doesn't have to be, something expensive, but you just think about it. And if you think about extending, how do you make sure that this whole experience of applying was good enough so that if you have a job some other time, they will be applying again?
Yeah. Because
for the most part, the applying it's a shitty process, and it's a shitty experience. And I don't care who you are, but if you're large scale, the company, if I had a shitty experience the first time, the probability of me applying some other time, no matter the job, I'm not saying it's zero, but it's going to be closer to zero.
Yeah. Well, the organization's going to need to do a lot more on the enticing part to get you re-engaged again. So yeah.
Yes, the re-engagement. So as we spoke about, how do you make it such a great experience that they will come back if they, if the chance is there?
Yes. And I think, this model works. I mean, as you say, I think just to clarify, I think it works really well because it's kind of a lens, basically. You can focus it really, really tight into a particular part or a touch point, such as the application, or it can be slightly drawn higher and look at maybe just a whole or end-to-end onboarding program. So for me, from a recruitment point of view, I look at enticing, which is obviously looking at the attraction piece. The entering is probably the application. Engaging is the actual interview process. Exiting is the decision, positive, whether you're hired or not. And then extending that then moves into, if you're hired, into how you keep them and retain, or extending is then how you leave it at least positively memorable.
Absolutely.
That they're prepared to come back and re-engage again in the future. So that works. That works really, really well.
And the thing about experience is that the easiest experience to produce and to remember is the bad experience.
Yes.
so, and if you have a bad experience about something, you know this from yourself, you're going to tell it to everybody. But the thing is, if you have a really great experience, it's even more probable that you're going to tell somebody, right?
Yes. I can't remember the stats. I think it might be the other way around, actually. I believe I can't remember the numbers. I'll give you a random set of numbers, but it was something it was like 8 times more likely to share bad, 3 times more likely to share good. It was something like that. It was so actually just shows how hard we have to work to ensure that people are have a positive experience. But that the smallest detail can impact the potential fit, and the amount of impact is far greater. I
think at least if you use the model, I mean, it at least makes you think about how does it work now, and is there any way we could just improve it? I mean, just a tiny fraction.
Absolutely. And I think also that would work really well with maybe like from a layering point of view of tools. You could then maybe do like a journey map. You could maybe do some kind of empathy map, and then do the 5 E's over the top as well. So it could complement other tools and
absolutely. It's pretty much about just mapping sort of what is the timeline.
Yes.
And how do you work with the different parts and as I said, you might I worked with it a lot of times, and the one project we did that had to do about what's the experience of being in a bus.
Yes.
I mean, public transport, right? And we actually found out, asking customers, that it's very interesting that one of the most important things that happens when you ride a bus is when you get in. That's the entering point. So if the chauffeur just, looks at you, maybe gives you a smile, just, then people riding a bus, at least in Denmark, they're 70% happy, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, that's a small but very important gesture, right? And that happens when you enter.
Yeah.
So that was very, sort of, okay, something important actually happens here, right? If you move into an H&M store, the only thing that happens when you enter is, the sliding doors open, and that's it.
Yes. And how else did you break that bus journey down? What other parts were that kind of formed part of that experience that you found just now?
With the buses?
Yeah.
Yeah, asking customers, we found out that the 2 things were important when they spoke about the experience of riding. But it has nothing to do with actually, is the bus on time?
Yes.
But the funny thing is, if you ask people who run trains or bus companies, that's all they talk about. They say, is it on time? Is it not on time? Then that's what they occupy themselves with. But actually, when the bus is there, being greeted when you get into the bus. And then the other thing was, if the bus was driving pretty sort of steadily, that was very important. So if those 2 things were actually happening, that you were greeted by the chauffeur when you got in, and there was a pretty steady ride, then people were 95% happy with the experience of being in the bus.
Yes. And I share that, because obviously I've moved from London, which, the buses, bus drivers aren't overly engaging at the best of times. To Sweden and in Stockholm, where actually the bus drivers are really engaging. I mean, they're genuine, and actually, I can honestly say there's a difference on how that makes you feel. just on the simple thing of riding a bus. And so that for me, I can definitely share that. That definitely makes a big difference. The one thing they do need to improve though is their braking, because actually some of them brake way too hard.
Yeah.
But that affects how I feel afterwards. I get a little bit frustrated. Like, God, they don't need to brake. They don't need to brake so much. Why are they braking so much?
But there's actually this is a great and very easy model for implementation. It's also an E model, but it's only 3 E's this time. And we actually use this in the buses because the thing about you have to, if you think about this from an HR perspective, right?
Yeah.
But the usual way would be to round up the chauffeur and say you have to be better at braking, right? Or you have to provide a better service, and people will stand there and nod. Okay, but but if there's no empowering, if they haven't got any tools, if they don't know how to, the guys who were good or the women who were good at it yesterday are going to be good tomorrow, and those who weren't are not going to be any better tomorrow. So you have to leave people with something. So we had to look at in the project, how do we make sure that the chauffeur has enough sort of positive mental attitude so he can actually do this thing. So what's his workspace is like 1 square meter of monitors, dashboards, the bus has to work, everything like that. So what you really need to do is you need to find a way to optimize everything around the chauffeur, because if he knows the bus is working, the doors are working, the cameras are working, everything is fine, then he can shift his attention elsewhere, right?
Yeah, of course.
So instead of just telling the guy you have to do this, you can you can't ensure it again, you can't ensure it, but you can make it more probable that he actually has the mental attitude to shift his attention elsewhere, right?
Yeah, and that's part of the being empathetic to their role and what their challenges every day. They need to make sure the bus is safe and it's running effectively, and all those things that are running at the same time. To ensure that that's kind of is taken care of as much as possible allows them to focus on what is important around customer.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've heard over a few, because from the start through to the end here, was around. Because it all starts when you look at the design process generally, you start with with people ultimately, and the research forms a really important component of that. What do you think HR could be doing better around this piece? Because I think this is something which I think is quite interesting.
Well, as I started out with, there's something in the vocabulary. So you have to introduce a vocabulary that has to do with people and not things.
Yeah.
So actually, this bus project we got an international award in OECD. It was called the Transport Achievement Award, and the headline for this award was "Putting People First."
Yeah.
So putting people first, actually, I think is a great headline for what you need to do at HR. You need to look at people as people, because that's what they are, right? So they can't be numbers, they can't be assets. They can't be something you resource. It's not something you supply an availability of. So you need to introduce, they're people, right? Yeah. So, what makes them tick? You have to look at that. So you need to change the vocabulary, and if you get your hands on the experience economy, there's going to be sort of a very easy way to do that, actually, because it offers some vocabulary that relates to each economy, right?
Yeah.
You might also want to look at companies like Disney, actually, because they have Disney speak about, they say there's 2 types of organizational culture. One is by default, which is the most common, because so if you're the new guy and you think, well, why did they do stuff like this? Because the way I used to work, that they did it in a whole different way, right? So you have sort of this first months where you're trying to figure out what the culture is, right? Because nobody tells you, and if you ask why do you do it like this, because we always did it like this, so they can't even explain it themselves. And then they have this other type of culture, which is by design.
Yeah.
So as an HR department, if you just want to make that claim, we're going to do an organizational culture which is by design. Okay, get going, right? Yeah. Because then you have to figure out what is the culture then? And if you speak about another big topic, so if you have sort of digital transformation, innovation, I mean, you can do all kinds of things, but if you don't have the culture right, it's never going to happen. It's never going to be a thing. It's just going to be some, yeah.
It's just, it's going to burn.
It's going to be a surface thing, right? So if people are not allowed to make mistakes, you're never going to have any innovation, right? Because innovation is about being wrong, 99% of the time. So then, hey, I got this thing that actually works, right? Yeah. So you need to work on the culture, right?
Yeah.
So I think, again, as I said, it's very much about how you look at things and how you sort of rewire your brain and your perceptions about this is actually people. So, and the good thing about looking at people as people, you can sort of just ask yourself, what do I like if I'm in a setting? Oh, I like it this way and I like it that way. And, it's really nice when this happens. And so, okay. So if that's true, it's probable that other people are going to, have the same needs and wants. So is there a way you could implement that? And often it's very easy. One of the things about the experience economy, they don't speak about best practice. They speak about best principle. So if you have an experience that you enjoy, if you can sort of work out what's the working principle. So what's my favorite cafe? Why is it my favorite cafe? Why does it make me feel good, right? I was in a bike shop the other day. That was a great experience. But what were the things that were actually working? Okay, so if you take these principles and then you apply it to your own business, how does it then look? Because you can't do it one-to-one, but you can still apply the principle, the underlying principle.
Yeah, and it feels like the principle's more towards moving towards something, whereas I think best practice for me feels a bit more like it's an end, it's a destination, it's something you reach. And then absolutely. There's like a line, so it's very different. Yeah, again, it's how you look at it, but it's
But if you also if you say you have best practice, I mean, I'm not saying best practice is never applicable, but it's very rare that you have two entities that are completely the same. I have a master degree in history, and sometimes people say, "Oh, but history repeats itself." No, it doesn't. Because there's always something in a sort of a situation that makes it unique. The things you recognize are the patterns and principles working. That's what you recognize, and then you think, oh, it's just repeating itself. But it's not. So it's very much the same thing. It's about working out what's the principle beneath it all. What are the implications of what is happening? Yeah. So it's not about the technology. It's not about the situation. It's about the implications, right? Yeah. So that might be another way to look at things when you're doing experience design. So what are the implications of things? Yeah. As Joe would say, it's moving from the what to the how.
Yes.
So it's not what you do, it's how you do it.
Yeah.
And if you think more about how you do it, that's going to open up to you creating an experience just by this, and again, it's vocabulary. It's just, putting your head in a slightly different position, and then hey, you got something working for it, right? So it's not difficult.
So just to to help people, I guess, help change perspective or to broaden their view on stuff. Obviously, that requires reading or learning or training or talking to different people of different expertise. What would you, just for the audience, any kind of recommendations around really good reading or influencers that you'd recommend people kind of?
I kind of like this idea about just thinking about principle. What's the working principle? I mean, because you can do that if you go home from work, whether you're in your car, if you're walking, if you're driving a bike, think about, what are the experience that I have here? When is it a good thing? What could be optimized sort of, and then always just, okay, what do I like as a person? Yeah. And if I like something, we're not that different, right? We're all people. So just that's an easy way to train sort of.
Yes.
Because it's just, I don't know. I mean, you have kids, right? So at some point you look for pregnant women on the street, and if you don't look for them, there's no pregnant women in the street. But if you look for them, they're everywhere, right? We have this if you're going somewhere in a car here in Denmark, you probably have the same game. It's called yellow car.
Yeah.
And if you see a yellow car, you get to punch the other person right next to you, right?
Yeah, we done yellow car. Yeah.
And when you look for them, there's no yellow cars anywhere. But if you have this game on, they're everywhere, right? So it's kind of the same thing. Just start looking for these things. When did I have a great experience? And it could be in the supermarket. It can be, in Copenhagen, for example, a great experience is to go by a bicycle instead of a car. So what's the working principle for going by bike instead of a car?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Just start thinking about these little things and say, okay, if I have to apply this to my business, then, what does that look like?
What does it look like? So I think
because it's about flexibility. It's about, ease of access, stuff like that.
Yeah.
They're pretty easy to relate to, actually.
Excellent. So I think the message there is to HR or anyone in organisations is start looking for yellow cars in their business, and they'll soon principally. But yeah,
pretty much. Just starting, and I think this. I want to be part of an HR organization. We might call it something else. It can be an employee engagement, department. That would be great, right? Because then it's not HR anymore. Then we actually have a vocabulary that says this is experience economy, right?
Yeah.
Because we work with engaging people. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So a people engagement department. That sounds a lot better.
Yeah.
So that but again, it's just changing words. But I mean, words have meaning. So they kind of change your perspective. So that's always a good thing. And then just start doing pretty much. And if you have to read something, I would say obviously read the experience economy. And if you don't read anything, if you heard this, just get this 5E model. If you have the 5E model, I mean, you can do refining from there. But if you just start there, you'll be fine, because you're gonna start working with this, and the more detail you put onto it, the further you get. So if you don't like reading, or say I don't have the time or anything, just remember this 5E model.
Yep. Just Google it. Start with Google. It's super easy.
It's super easy.
Well, look, there's a parting gift for the listeners, and really great advice. I think the 5E model is a really good one. I think it's a really good way just to start a movement, which is what we're all about. So, but
if I have to mention one out of the model, so this is going to be so there's this the 4 experience realms.
Okay.
So there's aesthetic experiences where you sort of that is to be.
Yeah.
Then you have entertainment, which is to enjoy. Then you have education, which is to learn. And then you have the last one, which is escapism, which is to do or to do. Yeah. So if you just think about that, so if you're waiting for the bus, that's an aesthetic experience, right? But can you improve the aesthetic experience? Can you add elements of either entertainment, education, or escapism? Can you do that? Being on the bus can be an aesthetic experience, but if you have screens, you can do both entertainment, but you could also do education. So education would be, now you're traveling through, on this street, so what are the history of this street? What can you find on this street? How does the, how is this street compared to, other streets in the city? What used to be here? Stuff like that. So if you look at, I'm in a bus and I have this screen, I have to do screen content. You can use this model as well. So there are really straightforward models of just very basic things, and as soon as you start working with them, everybody can do it. So you don't have to do this. Oh, I'm not a designer, but you can be, and it's super easy. You just have to switch on your brain.
Yeah, and those 4 areas you mentioned, if you just put them on a board and then brought in team members and said, look, we're just going to do a little jam, and let's just see what people and make sure everybody kind of puts their own thoughts individually first onto a post-it note. Don't do it as a team,
no.
individually, and then put them all up and discuss it. You'll be absolutely amazed at what can come out of that. I'm absolutely certain.
Absolutely.
There'll be something.
And the good thing about this model as well is that's go for all the model is you can apply it to any level of granularity. You can, I mean, if you want a building, it can be a whole city, it can be, it can be a workshop, it can be a meeting, it can be pretty much anything. So just, that's the thing about training, isn't it? You have to do these things, all time and just over and over again. And at some point you think, you don't think about it anymore. You just do it, right?
Yes, I agree.
Yes.
Agree.
Yeah. Mm.
So I'm conscious of time now.
Yeah. Okay. That's a fair point.
And I will. So look, thank you, Morten. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you taking time out to be on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I know I'm looking forward to collaborating further, and and hope to have you over in Sweden sometime soon from Denmark.
Sure.
That'd be cool.
Absolutely, that'd be very cool.
Look, thanks ever so much, and have a great
You're welcome.
day.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there you have it, another episode of the Experienced Designers podcast. Thank you to Morten, and I will be sharing all of the links and resources in the bio, so feel free to check those out. And also, if you are enjoying the podcast so far, please feel free to like, rate or share. This goes an awfully long way to helping us grow our community and this movement. In the next episodes, I'll be sharing lots of interviews recorded live from the Design Thinkers Conference, where I spoke to people from all over the world who descended on Amsterdam to attend this fantastic event, focusing entirely on empathy. So lots of great insights and learning to share. So I'm looking forward to that one. So thanks for listening, and until the next time, bye for now.